Every time our athletes walk into this weight room, they're going to be pushed to the max.
Let's go! Let's go!
The barbell hasn't changed in over 100 years. I can take a 25-pound plate, and we'll go out on the turf, and I'll have you hating life. We talk about straining your gut, pushing past that comfort level. I want a lot of energy. What better breeding ground is there for being a success in life than the weight room?
Hey guys, welcome back to Iron Game Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and this is episode number 261. I want to thank you guys for listening each week. Really appreciate those of you that like, share, comment. Just helps me continue to highlight the great people in our profession. Also want to thank our sponsors, and specifically Iron Grip, for bringing this episode to you for free. I only partner with companies that I believe in both the product and the people. And Craig Sowers and Liz and everybody at Iron Grip are fantastic. It's what I have put in most every weight room I've had, including my home gym here. I have Iron Grip plates in that as well. So if you're in the market, I'd highly recommend you guys reach out to them. If not, just the next time you see them, please let them know how much you appreciate them being a part of everything. This week, I'm joined by a friend of mine, Lee Taft. Lee and I go back quite a ways. We've spoken probably at almost every clinic together.
Yeah, I think so.
Just a fantastic guy, fantastic family man, and it's been a long time coming, but I'm excited to have you on the show, man.
Thanks so much, Ron. I appreciate it. We get a chance to finally catch up again. I know we're always going in opposite directions of the world here, and so it's good to catch up. I appreciate you reaching out.
Well, Lee, you've been, you classify yourself as an athletic movement specialist. You're a speaker, you're a writer. You've done a little bit of everything in your career. I mean, it's spanning. I don't even know how many years now. Quite a while. We're both up there these days.
Yeah.
What experience do you attribute the person that you are today to the most?
Well, you know what I really think is I grew up in a family of coaches and teachers. My dad was 44 years a teacher, administrator, coach, all that stuff. So weren't my brothers, my sisters. So that kind of shaped me. I mean, sitting around, and I'm sure you've had this with your family, sitting around dinner table, it's like a film breakdown. You're sitting there in between portions of food. You're talking about, what went on in the game. Why didn't it work? Even when I started coaching, my first year as a head coach was in 1989. So, and even back then, that's when I started training athletes. So I can remember sitting and talking with my dad, and he would evaluate my game as a coach. And that was invaluable for me because I learned from somebody who did it 44 years and was around it forever, and as a teacher, as an administrator. And I think that shaped me more than anything. But what it did, Coach, is it allowed me to be able to search what I need better. So because he gave me such a great foundation, I didn't have to rustle through too many leaves to find the gold at the end of it. I could kind of go where I needed to go because he gave me a good foundation. He told me, this is what you need to improve. These are the things you need to do to be successful. So I was able to kind of follow that. And then obviously things come that you don't expect that change your life. And, but yeah, I'd say just my exposure to being a teacher and growing up in a family, that molded me more than anything.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, the best coaches are the best teachers typically. And being exposed to that early has obviously had a profound impact on your career. And it's evident by the way that you present. I mean, you present very much like a teacher.
Thank you. Yeah.
When arriving at a conclusion that, you're setting up the next question as you're going through, which I really enjoy. But you don't get to, train the number of athletes that you've trained or be, speaking at these national and international clinics without making some mistakes along the way. What's one of the biggest mistakes you've made and kind of how you learn from it?
I think probably, and this is kind of an overall philosophical mistake, is I was too stubborn early on in my approach. And I thought I could take the square peg and put it in a round hole. And I tried to force things that when the solution was right in front of me, but because I was stubborn and I thought, I could fix it, I didn't do a good enough job of being fluid in my early years. I was pretty much, this is the way it is. This is the way it's going to be. Going back to my dad who started coaching in the 40s, and during that time frame, they were pretty strict. I mean, he was in World War II. He was actually a physical instructor, physical fit during World War II. He trained a lot of people. So you can't be wishy-washy, in that situation. Well, that's kind of what I learned. So I think that was one of the biggest mistakes I made early on. And I think I screwed up some athletes over the time because I didn't take a better path when it was sitting there in front of me. I thought I could fix it. And people were trying to tell me, and I'm like, nah, I got it. And I think that was probably the biggest thing, is not being malleable. And I think that's what I try to tell interns and younger people now is, listen, yeah, you probably have a pretty good grasp on certain things, but there's a better way, and there's people who have carved it for you. And I think I'm very big with that. Like, I'll watch you speak, I'll watch these other great speakers out there, and I'll say, yep, that's it. I'm doing that because they've gotten proven results from it. So why should I waste time researching something when people I trust and who do the work already get the results? Now that's the way I do it. It makes my job easier, actually, and I get better results.
Yeah, it's one of the main reasons why I asked the question. I think, if you can learn from other people's mistakes, I mean, oftentimes you're going to be able to dodge a lot of those landmines along the way. But I think what you're talking about is one of those mistakes that sometimes you almost have to make on your own, something that you're just going to have to walk down that path. And I think we all go through a period of time when we think that we know it all and that we have a firm understanding of what we believe in and conviction about it. But ultimately, I think it just like I've found and you found, learning from others and having a big toolbox, I think is the way to go for sure.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt.
Well, you're known, for speed in general, and that's, multi-directional linear speed. And like I said, I don't think I've ever heard you give the same presentation twice. I think it's, I've always been impressed by that. But one of the topics that you speak about often is multi-directional speed. I mean, what do you think is being done well? What do you think there's some room for improvement?
Yeah, well, I definitely think our profession overall, the strength and conditioning is still so young compared to other professions. So we're learning as we go. And we learn from great coaches who, like you just said, make the mistakes, figure it out, and then we learn from there. Now, multi-directional speed is even younger when we consider it, because when I first started investigating this in the middle 80s, I couldn't find a lot on, like, you couldn't find just a bunch of books on multi-directional change. I could find anything on, the German textbook for speed and all the sprint models and Don Chu and obviously Dan Taft and all these great sprint coaches. And you could find that stuff, but the multi-directional stuff, what I am seeing now is that the good stuff is that people are starting to address it. They're starting to say, yes, we have to be strong. And I probably spend more time on strength training, and most people don't believe that, but I spend a ton of time on strength training because that's my foundation for my speed.
Sure.
But coaches are now looking at it and saying, okay, now I understand entry angles into the ground. I understand loading mechanics. So if an athlete is, externally rotated in their plant foot, well, they're going to get knee glide. That's going to be a little slower. People are seeing that now. So that's where it's coming. I think where the growth has to still come is many coaches still base their training only on a rehearsed drill. Perfect example is the NFL Combine. Those are very, very important drills, and they're important to be able to use. But at the end of the day, if the athlete can't react and then get into those positions, that's ultimately where we have to be. So my approach has always kind of been, all right, let's see what they give us reactively, and then let's get a corrective drill. Maybe a 5-10-5 is a great correction drill for a basketball player who has to get across the lane in help, now get back to close out on a 3-point. Okay, that's a specific application that's very reactive, and we can train it with a 5-10-5 if we want. But I think sometimes we almost like teach somebody how to dance. They learn the steps, they get really good at the steps, but then the ball goes up the whistle blows and then they don't know how to move. They don't move as well. So that's where I think we still have to keep getting a little bit better. But overall, I think our profession is growing so much in that area of multi-directional speed.
Yeah, I think, I remember those days. I mean, early internet, early, whatnot, you couldn't find things. And one of the things I did in my career was I would make binders on every topic of strength and conditioning I could think of, and research, find articles. And that multi-directional speed or that agility component was something that was limited to just a few of those pre-programmed or closed chain skills. And
yeah.
And so it's definitely an area of improvement that I think myself, as well as a lot of other coaches, still need to continue to research and dive into. Your quote, you've coined kind of the term of the Plyo Step. You've been able to really break down a lot of these types of steps or movements that are part of the process. And it came about from, if I remember correctly, your basketball coach, and you were like, you're a basketball player, and you're like, man, that's not how we, the coach kept teaching it kind of a way, and you're like, that's not how we move. I think when coaching, I mean, there's, as much as it's rooted in science, there's still a heavy component of it being an art and questioning kind of the status quo. And you've done that in your career. What's given you that confidence to do that, and then to turn around and still very much so. So even today, there's people that would disagree with you, or you're still kind of pushing the envelopes on different classifications and things. Where does that come from, and what would you say to a young coach that's maybe has some of those similar questions?
Yeah, definitely. Well, it all was rooted in the fact that for the first several years, all I did was watch. Before I started establishing any of my systems or philosophy, I just watched athletes after athlete after athlete. And I would watch old film of Gail Sayers and some of the great athletes that just didn't have you and I. They didn't have the quote unquote performance coaches and the strength and conditioning coaches like we have now. But I noticed they were moving like we move. They reacted, their feet moved. So when I always tell that story of of our coach talking about that, the part coach that made me always think about it was, I never thought of how my feet were moving. I just reacted. So when the coach would say, well, you're stepping backwards, I'm like, well, no, I'm not. I don't feel it. And then I started watching film and seeing what they were talking about. And then I said, well, wait a minute. Well, so isn't everybody else on the court. And so we're linebackers who are being taught. I used to watch Jack Lambert and Jack Ham and Mike Singletary and all these guys. And even I watched old film of Dick Butkus, and these guys would stand there and all of a sudden something happened quick. Well, what'd they do? They repositioned and they didn't think about it. And I guarantee you they weren't taught it. So the skill of like a plyo step, which was a term I came up with just because I thought of plyometric in the stretch shortening cycle, was because it kind of ties into that fight or flight. Okay, I got to either attack or escape, one or the other, and that's what the competitive drive that we get as an athlete in that environment. And so what allows me to do that to protect my body, either I'm protecting you because I'm going to hit you first, or I'm getting away from you because I'm trying to score or whatever. My body's going to intuitively know what to do. Now, you and I as professionals got to clean it up. We got to clean up the garbage, the tight ankles and the weak hips and the weak core. But the reactive stuff is built there, and our nervous system leaves us those clues. So I just watched it all those years, and that's how it came about. And I got confident enough to say, gosh, to this, I was 25 years old talking to 35-year-old veteran football coaches disagreeing with me. I'm like, sir, I understand what you're telling me, but watch. And this is where it comes from. And over the years, I've had many guys say, you know what, Lee, you're right, because that's what we saw our players doing. We just couldn't fix them. And I'm like, well, this is why you couldn't fix them, because the nervous system always will win that battle. And so in a nutshell, that's kind of how it came about and gave me the confidence to say, gosh, I don't know, I've seen too many athletes do this. And they're great athletes. O.J. Simpson, I remember watching him coming out of USC, and he would make those quick cuts and go through a quick seal block. And I'm like, holy cow, that's what we want. So anyway, that's kind of where it came from.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And what you said there at the very beginning of taking the time to actually watch the sport. Even though you might have played it, you might have been even, played it at a high level, still going back when you're doing that needs analysis and really breaking down the demands of the sport, but also the steps and the movement categories and things along those lines. It's important, and you'll start to see things, and that's, as practitioners, that's where we need to become more. We need to help the scientific process and start to classify those things and do some research and do more in-depth analysis to be able to say, what can we fix and what we can't. And oftentimes as coaches, we get those great athletes where you get the directive from the head coach, just don't mess this one up,
That's right. Get out of his way.
They'll fit everything, and check every box, but they seem to be able to play at a high level. And so I just thought that was always a cool message that you always shared in your presentations, that it's okay to question, but do it correctly and to do it, and have it research based or be able to support it somehow, some way.
That's right. Yep.
You talked about a system philosophy. You have a reactive tier system for speed. Go into a little bit, just a brief overview of what that is and how people can maybe implement something similar.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reactive tier system is my way of helping coaches be able to say, okay, we're going to start at a grassroots level and we're going to do a tier 1 exercise. The best example is a track athlete in the blocks, right? They know where they're going. They just don't know when, not till the gun goes off. So we can implement any number of tier 1s. It could be a base stealer, getting in a lateral stance, ready to get a jump to steal second. Okay, that's a tier 1 because they know they're going to go to the right. They just don't know when. And it could be on a command, or it could be on the lean of a pitcher. We could do that for any sport. Then what we do is once we feel comfortable, we can go to a tier 2. A tier 2 is the athlete doesn't know which way they're going to go and they don't know when. So if I'm in an athletic stance facing you, coach, and you point to the right or left, okay, I have to react and I have to take off in whatever mode of movement you tell me. You might say, okay, Lee, I want you to shuffle to that 5-yard mark to your right or left based on my command. And you could give me an auditory, you could give me a visual, or any combination. And so we will move in those directions. Now it could be forward, backwards, it could be angular. Now a tier 3 is the same as a tier 2, where you don't know where you're going and you don't know when, but there's multiple movements. So that would be another example of that would be, let's say you dropped a tennis ball in front of me and I had to react and run to that tennis ball and catch it before it bounced twice. But you had a second tennis ball in your other hand. So as soon as I caught that one, you threw the other one somewhere else. So now I'm reacting more than once. That would be categorized a tier 3. And then we can build from there. And the nice thing with these is you can make them very slow to fast. You can build. So I'll do them during my warm-ups a lot, because what it does, and the reason I developed kind of this system, is my athletes, sometimes when I first would start a workout, they're kind of sluggish and they just didn't get into it. So now, like, you and I might stand shoulder to shoulder. I can't go till you go, but when you take off, then I can go. Well, automatically it becomes a little bit more competitive. My energy systems and my nervous system and everything just kind of ramps up to prepare to compete with you, even at a low level. So it doesn't matter the exercise. I've literally done it with, like, how we do knee hugs and walking lunges to warm up. I've literally done them with those, where I lined everybody up and I said, you can't leave until the person in the middle goes. Well, all of a sudden you're seeing everybody kind of get ready. It's like they're ready to race, even though they're not racing.
Right.
But so that's why I'll use them. And then I've established the kind of a sequence, even with hand speed, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, hand reactive speed. So that's really what it is. It's my way of categorizing and progressing different levels of speed that we would do normally anyway. It just gives me a category to put them in. And then I just tell coaches, use your experience and your toolbox of drills, just throw them in either a tier 1, tier 2, or a tier 3 and have fun with them. So that's what it is about. Then after that, then we go to the correctives.
Yeah. So when you're talking, let's just say that you're doing a traditional 4-day split, upper and lower, and you're doing maybe 2 days linear, 2 days multi-directional. What in a weekly kind of format like that, what would it, would that be a 30-minute session and 10 minutes in each block, or is that is that a 30 minutes in tier 1 week 1 and tier 3 in week 4?
Yeah. So typically what I'll do is, if we're in the initial phase, so let's say we're going to have a 2 to 3 week phase of this movement. And let's say we want to just start out with pure acceleration stuff early on. We're not going to go too hard early in the summer or spring. It's football. We got some time. What we're going to do is we're going to spend some time on just some easy pushing, so acceleration stuff, and we're going to make it tier 1 for the first 2 weeks to 3 weeks, okay? And it could be in any direction. It could be backwards. It could be forwards. It could be lateral. And then we're going to go into it. So then what we would do, Coach, after we've done those first 2 weeks of a tier 1 where we're pretty much programmed as to knowing where to go, just don't know when, then we could start to add if we want to stay at the tier 1, if we're not happy with where our progress is, what we can do is just start adding resistance. So now if I let's say I want to do a 5-yard lateral shuffle, and I want to start adding resistance to it. Could be a sled, could be a partner in a band, it could be any form of resistance. Now we're just increasing load, okay? We're working on the same pattern, we're getting more fluid, but we're increasing force output, rate of force development, all those things get to benefit from it. Then what we can do is we can move to a tier 2 once we start hitting, if we want to go 2-week phase with no resistance in tier 1, we can do that. Then we can go another, 1 to 2 weeks of loaded. Then we can start to move into the tier 2. Now they're getting reactive. They don't know which way they're going to go. But we can also, there are ways to add resistance to that, but what I normally do there is we add 3 in a group. So you and I and a third partner, and what we do is we have a band around on each side of you. So if I shuffle to my right, well, the other partner might be resisting me. If I go to the left, then you might be the one resisting. Right. And that works pretty well, actually. We just hook it onto a belt or a regular loop. And then when we go to tier 3, our forms of the natural movement, okay, without resistance, are just pure. You're going to move how they're going to move. But if we want to add resistance, then it would be more with either adding a medicine ball, so like a fake throw series, or you could go to a weighted vest, okay? And then we start to have a little bit more vertical with high horizontal or frontal plane loading, because the vest is above the center of mass typically. So it'll be, now they're having to deal with that sway component to change a direction, which is really what tier 3s are about. It's about the ability to dig in, change directions. And so the strength and conditioning coach can now use their creativity and where they want to go based on how much time they have. So if I'm in off season and I've got months, I can just hold their hands and walk them through it. But if I've got maybe 6 weeks preseason, the main season starts real quick, so I might progress it a little bit faster, still being safe in hitting checking the boxes I need to check and fill in the buckets I need to fill. I can still do that. That's the neat thing with the tier system, is it's not like teaching somebody to power lift, where eventually more weight wins. Well, with multi-directional speed, I can add resistance if I need it. Sure. But I just want to have the purity of movement. That's the essence of the tier system, is I can really take the athletes where I feel they are at that moment, and I can add resistance if I need to, or just keep it more reactive and have that be the higher element or the more intense component. Yeah. Yeah,
I like that a lot. You and I've talked before about, just, when you're working with athletes, there's giving them enough information, and then there's overcoaching. Yeah. You do a great job of being able to dose that out properly. What advice would you have to the young coach about just when to say something and when not to say something?
Yeah, if we went back to a question early on and the mistakes I made, well, that'd be another one. I used to, because when you earn your badge of coaching and your certificate, you graduated, you're like, hey, I got letters behind my name. Now I get to talk. Well, I made a mistake, and sometimes I talked athletes out of good movement because I wouldn't shut up. Sure. Now what I do, and what I try to tell my interns or my assistants is like, you've got to give an athlete a chance to figure out their failures, because failures happen sometimes because the skill is just new to them. You've thrown a curveball at them. They haven't experienced it yet, so their motor program hasn't been established. That's not going to be fixed by me, yelling at them or even constructively try to. Sometimes it's just giving them more chances. It's like riding a bike. Until my body figures out the balance points, I'm going to tip over. Once it does, then they'll get good. So the advice I give is start to learn enough about movement to understand, is it a motor programming issue? Is it a mobility stability issue, which is fixable sometimes really quick? Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But if it's a motor programming issue, it's going to take a little bit longer. Or is it a lack of understanding of what we're asking them to do? If it's that, it has to be an immediate intervention. So if I tell an athlete, okay, I want you to do a side shuffle and then throw a medicine ball, and they kind of like are hopping sideways or stepping wrong, okay, that's my fault because I didn't instruct them well enough.
Right.
I'm going to intervene right off. But if they're simply they just haven't gotten the flow yet, you just got to give them time. It might be one day, it might be 2 weeks. You just got to give them a chance to get there. As long as they're heading in the right direction, then then we need to go to cueing. Cueing is short, quick, it's not overwhelming, and what it does is it gives the athlete confidence in your coaching. Because if I say too much and they have to overthink, sometimes what it does is it makes them nervous. But if I just say, hey, all I want you to do is push the ground away. Well, that's very easy, understandable. They get it. Confidence goes up, and then we get better results.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's such an easy mistake to make where you just want to throw a bunch of things out there to make it sound like you know what you're doing, and it confuses the athlete. It frightens. There's a book that I often refer to called Switch, that it frightens the elephant. The emotional.
Yes.
Get scared and you're not able to decipher which one of those it is, whether it's motor programming or mobility stability, or if they just need more time. And so just go back and I think it's a consistent theme in this podcast is that you got to show some restraint and some patience, and continue to watch and see what's going on, but then to turn around and dose out your coaching as well. And so that's a great message. We end the show, Lee, with some resources here. What's the best piece of coaching advice you ever received?
I would say, well, I'm going to give you kind of two quick ones. Number one is do no harm. Okay. Make sure if they're already good athletes, don't screw that up. Okay. So, don't overcoach them by doing too much with them. So don't hurt them. And then I would just say the other one, would be to don't, just because you're getting results doesn't mean you're always doing the right thing, because we're a young profession and we're figuring it out really quick that, I could get results on something, but what's going to happen in 20 years? Is that athlete going to need a hip replacement? Is that it? So it's more or less, small doses, get them results, keep them on their playing field or their court or their track or their ice, and don't detract from what it is ultimately they want to do, and it's play sports. They come to us. I always understood my role. My role is secondary, and I'm okay with that because, they got to play their game. So those would be the two big things.
No, absolutely. Echo both of those. We're going to make sure we link up all your resources, which if you haven't been on leetaft.com or watched Lee speak, you should definitely do so, and just have some great resources out there for the coaching community. But give us a book, app, and website recommendation.
Well, I'll tell you, if I were to go with an app, and I'm not a huge app guy, I'm just not one of these real big technical guys, as you've found out pretty quick, but the one that I use, is two of them really. One is Huddle, one is Coach's Eye. those are the type of things that I use. Believe me, my homework at night after I train, I literally got a bunch of video from this athlete I trained earlier today. I will study it tonight. And that's my next session will be based off what I watched on my phone, my iPhone. And so I'm real big on breaking down film, and it's just like that's my way to coach my athletes up, and it teaches me a lot. So that's a big one. A book that, this is going to sound odd, probably very few people have heard of it, but I actually have it somewhere here. I always refer to it. It's called A Brief History of Physical Education. Now, I have a physical education background, and I swear that's my foundation of movement when I teach things. I just love it. I just grew up around it. I love it. It's an old book. I want to say the first printing was like, gosh, I don't know, 1950 something or whatever it was. Could have even been earlier than that. And actually, I think it was earlier than that, the original one. That's just been a great book for me because I go back and it just breaks down the history of how we taught physical fitness and learning. So I like it a lot. And then you asked for one more, and
website.
Website.
Yeah.
I'm big on other great coaches out there that do things and give information. Like I like Altus, Dan Taft, I think, in his group. I think they do a really good job. That's a website that I've looked at a lot, and there's many others, but that's one that just because he breaks down things, and all those guys break down things really well, and I like that. I appreciate that. So that's one I look at a lot.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, man, this episode's tons of great nuggets in there. I've written almost 2 pages of notes, and I think what I've always respected about you the most is that, like I said earlier in the show, that you're not afraid to question the status quo and share what your learning experiences have been. And I think too many coaches, they want to stay, kind of under the protection of what other people have socially said is okay, or they're not confident enough in themselves to be able to put themselves out there. But yeah, it's something that you've done your whole career. You continue to do so, and every year you stack more and more practical success stories and application and research behind what you believe in. And I think that's the testament to a great coach that's on the cutting edge. And so I appreciate what you do and how you do it, man, and really coming on the show.
Thank you. Can I just say one more thing, Coach, before we go on that, because I think it's important. Is the one thing is, first of all, I have a pretty thick skin. I don't take things personal. I know that people are not attacking Lee Taft. They might be attacking my philosophy, and that's okay. Sure. And I think part of the thing is that makes our profession grow is we've got to get people to the point where they start to question things. And I don't mean questioning disrespectfully. I just mean saying, well, geez, I don't know if I agree with that, because if they do that, typically they'll research it. Right. And that's one thing I've always felt that has helped me. So I've always tried to just put my thoughts out there. And if it provokes conversation, a lot of times there's been people on certain things that they've convinced me, like, yeah, Lee, you did look at it wrong. And I figured it out. I did, but it was because I got it out there. And like you said, too many people are afraid, and it's like, it's not personal. You and I are in, if you and I had thin skins, we would not be in this profession, because you take a beating from a lot of people. Right. So,
well, I appreciate it, buddy. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate you reaching out.
That's it for this episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk. Thanks to this week's guest as well as our sponsors for bringing this episode to you for free. Make sure to check out ronmckeefery.com, where you can join our mailing list, find the show notes, including all the links and resources mentioned, and information about Coach McKeefery's other products. While you are there, please join Coach McKeefery in the comments section thanking our guest for sharing. If you haven't subscribed to Iron Game Chalk Talk on YouTube or iTunes yet, make sure to do so. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome. Coach McKeefery can be found on Twitter at @RMcKeefery, on Facebook and YouTube at /Ron.McKeefery. That's it for this week. Be sure to check back next week for another great episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk.